Hello. Thank you to having us. Thank you, Alexandre to have invited us to make this series of conversation about the Chinese subculture. We're going to start the second part of the discussion. We're pleased and amazed by our two artists, Cyril Duval, aka Item Idem, and Cheng Ran. And they collaborate together on a video project called JOSS. Then we're going to watch right now.
So maybe we could begin with the beginning. How did you two met? Was it in a club, in an airport, a restaurant, elsewhere?
Actually, I think I was at an opening, but our first work meeting was like the most poetical situation ever. He invited me to Hangzhou, where he lives, and there's the what is the exact name of the lake? It's a great lake. The West Lake, which is one of the most famous sightseeing site in China. And we went on a boat and had tea and discussed the work on the boat, on a small, boat with, just a tiny situation.
Yeah, that's quite romantic. Yeah, we met, yeah, first met we met in the boat, and you know in China the China political party they are built just from a boat, so that's become a very big thing. Yeah.
Actually, I was to talk about the work. I was invited by this magazine Visionnaire commission to do a piece. And I was living in China at the time. I was looking to collaborate with an artist, and a common friend of us, Leo Shu, which used to be his gallerist, introduced us. And we sort of connected very quickly on our references for the work, and everything was totally seamless, the way we worked, the production. I think even the edit, we had a meeting, a 20-minute meeting before I took my plane, and just discussed the edit, and then he cut the film, and it was exactly the way we sort of foresee that project. And initially the project was commissioned for the magazine on this idea of good tidings, which for me was this idea of emotional cleansing. So that's why Objects of Consumerism on Fire. That was the first approach. But then what was supposed to be a web project became an important piece for the two of us, because it went on touring, and it's still actually touring. People are still showing the work. Might it be at the White Rabbit collection in Sydney, or last year at Art Basel in Hong Kong in the film section. So the film is 6 years old, but we keep on showing it, and sometimes touring with the work. Yeah.
So JOSS deal with a really specific funeral rite. Maybe you could introduce this idea to our audience, which funeral rite it is.
Well, all those objects are linked to, they're sort of derivatives of what is called paper money or ghost money, that is burned to honor the dead in rituals in China. So you're supposed to burn image of physical value to offer it in the afterlife. So it started with the traditional paper, which is usually gold or silver for the ghost or the gods. But then in the consumerist era, it becomes dollars, it becomes Louis Vuitton bags, it becomes every kind of objects of consumerist fetishism. I've heard of Viagra pills, I've heard of tons of things. So the more you source, the more you look at those objects, the more they evolve with the world we live in, actually.
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing in China. I think time is changing, and in the new generation, before this tradition only the paper money, and maybe 10,000, like million, whatever. But it's interesting because time changing, and the different technologies come, and the people who want to give a memory for past family or someone, so they updating theme with this different time. So they developing iPad, also computer, different kind of things. So that's become really special stuffs for tradition from China, and also I think that's a real subculture from China. It's really many young people actually like this fake design also like illegal way to produce, also different way to how they don't care how to use these things. So that's quite interesting. And also Sarah, he's really during the time I think he's working as a fashion director of Modern Weekly. So he's really had really good eye and idea about fashion, what situation from China. You know, a factory from China, they fake all the famous brands, and they fake everything from out of China. So that's all become a resort into this really cheap stuffs.
Yeah, just to speak quickly about what Cheng Ran just said, I was also very interested by of course, the logo and the branding aspect of those objects and their take on intellectual property, because they're actually fake objects and fake logos, but they're not real because they're paper objects, right? They're replica. They're the ghost image of a real bag, right? But there's a funny anecdote. Before Gucci used to be cool, and they made a show with Maurizio Catalan about counterfeit culture and stuff. They sued manufacturers in Hong Kong for selling paper bags, and it was a huge scandal all over Twitter. People were saying, so I can't buy a Gucci bag in my real life, and you don't even want me to own one in the afterlife. So they apologized to all those for not respecting the funerary cultures, because for them it was an infringement of the copyright. But we are talking about a bag that's actually not a bag, right? So, and those objects change with the society. Every time I go to Hong Kong on West Queens Road, where there's all the shops, you see new products. I see dog food. I see gym sets. I see bags, like kids' bags for school bags for kids that passed, really also sad situations. All kind of objects.
So counterfeit culture is directly integrated in the creative process. It's become an object. Maybe I know how much counterfeit is important as a subculture in your work. Maybe we can talk a bit about this aspect.
Sure. I mean, very quickly, because it's almost another topic, but I had a branding strategy collaborative project called Shanzai Biennial, who pretended to be an art biennial, who pretended to be a fashion brand, but who was none of it. And we were studying a genre of counterfeit from China called Shanzai, which means piracy, which comes from Shenzhen and the counterfeited phones, and we moved on to mostly to the genre of garment making. But the difference that I make personally between a counterfeited bag and a Shanzai product is the counterfeited bag is trying to look real, but is fake. The Shanzai products is sort of some people call it the pop art of China. It's combining at the same time many logos together to create something new. So you have a super famous piece. It's a Harry Potter bag with Obama and Sonic the Hedgehog together, and it's always a take on language, logos, branding. It's satirical, it's intentional, and to my understanding, it comes from the grassroots of the people working in the factories producing luxury goods, who sometimes they cannot own them, so they sort of appropriate them and create something new. So it's appropriation in design, but it's creating new intellectual materials. Sorry.
And maybe to go back to JOSS, you used Franz Schubert Ave Maria, which is maybe the most volatile and used classical song ever, because it came when it was sung by Nina Hagen, Beyoncé, and also it was used in Fantasia from Walt Disney. I wanted to know more about this specific choose.
We could do a Beyoncé remix, maybe.
Yeah, I think Serial is supposed to use this soundtrack. It's very beautiful, yeah, and we make it slower, maybe 10 times.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so we try to keep the sound as long as possible. Also, for the image, we use high-speed camera. I think the technology make our change.
The camera was fantastic.
Yeah, how to look at the world with different speed. So we use very high speed to show the explosion of all the projects. So we try to see all the details with pieces of fake Pradas, fake Gucci's. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we also bounded on our references. When I approached Cheng Ran with this idea, I was thinking of this piece by Fishley and Weiss, The Way Things Go, and which is this mechanical process of explosions, and of course he was very receptive to it, and he came back with another reference, which is Zabriskie Points, right, with the explosion scene at the end, and I think that's the closest from. I mean, of course, that's really a masterpiece on its own, right? But that was the closest reference we could. Also, with an amazing soundtrack with Pink Floyd, right? So I think the sound aspect was very important. But also there was this cultural collaboration because we come from different background, and I was suggesting to work with a religious artifact that deals with his culture and not mine, and so I thought religious music would be interesting, and not being an expert, that's the only, the Ave Maria is the only thing I could think about, and Cheng Ran loved it, and then we altered it in tonality to create something even more spectral and even more.
Before introducing your second video, Tale of Misfortune, we could maybe come back to this idea of subculture. We made just a talk 1 hour before, talking about Shanghai and Shenzhen and Hangzhou subculture. You're currently living in Taipei. I was very curious about your relationship to subculture. I know your strong interest for the question, so.
Subcultures as in clubbing, as in design, or as in.
Our focus were like clubbing and queer scene particularly, but fashion also.
Okay, I think my relation with my life in Taiwan is actually more focused on looking at the very ancient and traditional aspects and rituals, and how I can get inspired by them to make new materials. But that said, I think Taipei is a very vibrant city, and obviously the queer scene, if that's what the question you're asking, is also very, very dynamic. You know, there's the marriage equality, first place in Asia. People are really proud about it. It's the Gay Pride next week, and I know all the gays from Asia are coming just for that, because Taipei is a big gay hub, you know. So. And the music scene, you've heard of this club called Final? It's like a really great techno club where all the really good DJs from Shanghai come as well. It looks like a church of concrete, and the owner designed some artworks who looks inspired from like Cronenberg movies. It looks like it's a techno club, but it looks like a movie set, basically. Yeah, totally. And I mean, Taipei doesn't have a cyberpunk aesthetic the same way that Hong Kong or Tokyo has, but there is something about that in specific places. Yeah, it's more like an urban jungle because it's tropical, so there's like greens everywhere on buildings. And, yeah. Ouais, de QuickTime. Voilà. So do you want to talk about that? Or? So yeah, very quickly, with this collaboration that I did with Cheng Ran, sort of really influenced my body of work since 6 years. And since 2 years, I'm working on a documentary film series entirely in Mandarin, a language I do not speak. so that's a little difficult to edit. Looking at Taoist culture in China, outside of China, following the Chinese diaspora. So I shot in China, I've shot in China, Hong Kong, I've shot in Taiwan, I've shot in Singapore, I've shot in Malaysia, I've shot in Indonesia, wherever the Chinese diaspora went. And this is a very different piece. It's a documentary made by an artist, so it has this aesthetic of a documentary, but it sort of follows my train of thought into looking at this culture. Yeah.
So it's definitely linked to ancient rituals, and a Taoist one, a radical one, where the body is exposed to firecrackers.
There is that piece that I've done that I'm showing in IRL, which is less linked to consumerism and linked to fortune. And the name of the film, Fortune, is a very Item Idem double meaning. It's fortune as wealth, but fortune as destiny. You know, so that's what interests me actually. And the whole purpose of my research is to see very clearly how religion and consumerism or modern day capitalism can collide, and that I found fascinating, and that's why those objects inspire me. Yeah.
The notion of positive fortune is overwhelmingly present within Chinese culture, and the popular folklore practiced by the Chinese diaspora will attest the embodiment of this concept through many religious festivals or rituals all over Asia. Interesting studies show that the Chinese culture historically created paper, but also what would become to be known as paper currency. Funeral rituals introduced mock money and currencies to honor the dead. The common denominator of many of these rituals is the practice of burning paper money or paper architectures. May it be to honor the memory of ancestors, praise the gods, or feed the ghosts. Paper burning is always at the center of many of the practices. Through generations and generations, the act of paper burning has also evolved. Different objects have been created, and sometimes the design of these objects mimic the evolution of the society and the world in the 21st century contemporary age. New objects relating to the consumerist era, branded products and logos, objects of desire expressing the physicality of life that are burned and sent as a message to the afterlife.
I was really fascinated by their real size, and I think there are many things I can study with this paper offering particular issues, like fashion, like our pattern of consumption, like it's a cultural practice.
What is the symbolism behind the paper, behind the fire or the smoke? How can religious practices and aspirations towards the afterlife collide with the physical ideas of consumerism and material possessions? What does it mean for traditional techniques to evolve into mass production of objects which are themselves dealing with the contemporary ideology of mass consumerism? Through my journey around Asia in the search of the Chinese diaspora, I have documented several rituals and performances and collected many testimonials from various types of individuals. Trying to shed light on these questions rather than providing definite answers, I'm hoping this film series will provide possible new interrogations.
Maybe you could give us a bit of insight about what you just talked between the relationship between religion and mass consumption? and especially in like this apparent paradox between immateriality and people being burned as well as object and possession?
Sure. So as the trailer sort of explains, these rituals of paper burning exist since like millenaries, right? And the Chinese culture is known to have been to have created paper, the material, but also paper currency. There's I interviewed an historian, Swiss historian, who's a specialist on those objects, who explained to me that the very first JOSS paper objects were pieces of paper with coins printed on them. So JOSS paper objects, JOSS paper money existed before real money, which is the most fascinating things, you know. So they were burned for the funerals before real money actually existed. So if you take it from there, those symbols of wealth have been evolving the same way society evolved. So in a documentary, I go see traditional craftsmen and makers. So they usually make one-to-one size traditional houses and that are burned for different occasions, and those objects have been evolving now. Sorry, I keep on doing this. And so the branded products appeared, and so on, and yeah, they're evolving in that sense. I mean, it's what's really interesting for me is this the physicality of those objects, of like, you know, the image of physical possession that you destroy to send in the afterlife. That I found extremely amusing, you know.
Thank you. Maybe we can, Cheng, you want to add something? No, that's. Maybe we can open the.
For me, maybe I want to ask you a question. It's like, because I had to shoot many of the footage for the film that I'm making. Sometimes outside of China, those rituals are more practiced, and I'm still trying to understand in various places of China how people relate to this idea of burning paper or burning object. I think more in the countryside than the big cities, but for example, through your friends, your family, how you perceive it yourself.
Yeah, I think it's especially for maybe south of China, more close to Hong Kong or East South Asia. So they have this tradition for burn papers. In our city, for example, in north of China, we don't have this tradition. Yeah, maybe because too cold, it's not easy to burn things. But I mean, that's really interesting. This always connect with modern city, with us, with what's happening during the in the world. Maybe now it's also developing, become like a Bitcoin, also become paper JOSS. So yeah.
I saw an artist that I follow on Instagram who created Bitcoin paper JOSS. Is in Vietnam, but it plays on the same culture. I thought it was actually very cool. In a documentary, I'm also asking other questions about the ecology, because you know there's a huge problem. Actually, in China, sometimes it's illegal to do because of the carbon footprint from all the fires. That's why you see there's like those machines to burn everything at the same time. And also a big question that I have is, if those objects mimic the evolution of society, could they become digital? Can fire be digital? In the same way that if someone dies, people use their wall on Facebook as a memorial, you know? So there is like e-postcards with fire and that kind of aesthetic. So it's, you know, can paper be digitized, you know? That's one thing I'm trying to raise in the film. Yeah.
Now the fire also be digital. Yeah. If you go to a temple, before was always with fire, but you know the quality for the air, everything is really bad in China. So now they make all the fire become digital. Right. Yeah, you only with a LED inside. So that's good.
Yeah, maybe that's our next piece. We've been talking about doing something again together, because JOSS was like a very nice collaboration and successful as well. So.
Thank you. Maybe we can open the question to the public. definitely. So tonight we have like two DJ sets with incredible person. The first one, Antonin Roux and Erwan Sene, will. Sorry. Yeah, Erwan Sene and Antonin Roux will present their records proxy, and will make a specific playlist based on Sino-futurism, so a subject we treated a bit this afternoon. And then Shushu will play for 2 hours, so we're really proud of that. Thank you so much.